Welcome to this podcast in a series developed by the Nebraska Juvenile Justice Association. NJJA is a 501c3 not-for-profit public benefit association. The mission of NJJA is to improve services to youth in the juvenile justice system by serving as a resource for collaboration, leadership development, and education for juvenile justice system professionals and interested stakeholders. Our efforts are greatly enhanced with the generous support of the Sherwood Foundation. Please visit our website at njja.org to see a list of upcoming podcasts, as well as the opportunity to revisit those podcasts previously recorded. We welcome your thoughts as to potential podcast topics and interest. Welcome to the Juvenile Justice in Nebraska podcast, produced by the Nebraska Juvenile Justice Association. All right, let's get started here. NJJA podcast, episode 7. Here we go. All right, super excited to be here today. We got Kyle Kinney here with us today from the Nebraska Family Helpline. He's going to share some information with us on what the Helpline is and hopefully have some good topics to discuss here. But we're also joined by the NJJA Executive Director, Mr. Tom McBride.
Oh, you hear all that applause.
Yeah. So it is very special for me when Tom joins. Tom's got a wealth of knowledge, obviously, and he's been around the game for a while. So I'm happy to have him as well.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So Kyle, Mr. Kyle Kinney, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get to the topic at hand here.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, Kyle Kinney, I am a Nebraska boy, born and raised, moved around a little bit, but by and large, Albion, Nebraska's home. So folks of I'm back in Boone County. You definitely know my folks, definitely knew my grandparents. So that's home. Yeah, you never really take the farm out of the kid. That's for sure. And so I think that's really the environment I grew up in, and have always had just a deep love for Nebraska. I really don't have any desire to ever really live anywhere else. My wife, who grew up all over the world, would maybe disagree with that, but she's grown to love the state as well. Have 4 daughters, everywhere from all the way from second grade up into sophomore year of high school. They certainly keep us busy, sports and social lives and all the things that comes with being a dad of girls.
4 girls.
4 girls.
Wow.
4 girls. Yeah, that's the look I usually get.
Yeah.
But you know, it's I never really.
Perfect.
Yeah. It really didn't matter to me because I've enjoyed it for sure. Kind of my background, really, I'm a therapist by trade. I've done human services. I've done helping people as long as I can remember. I always knew I was going to end up working with people, even since I was a little kid, and you kind of move past I'm going to be a baseball player stage. And so went to college for counseling psychology, and literally the day my undergraduate ended, my wife and I moved to Boys Town as family teachers. And we were there for 4.5 years. Loved it. We did boys for 1.5 years, and then had girls for 3 years. So really got used to that idea. Our first daughter was born there. It was a great experience. About that time, wrapped up my master's. Went in, worked with at that point worked with some foster kids and running some foster care programs. Wow. Worked with high school dropouts for several years, and then made my way back to Boys Town and working with the Nebraska Family Helpline. About 7 years ago, once I had my full licensure and completed my provisional work, started out as the clinical supervisor with the Helpline, and then been the manager for about 3.5 years.
Awesome. That's a lot in a short amount of time, but obviously kudos to you and your wife. You guys have done so much already in such a short amount of time, it sounds like. So we're greatly appreciative of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we've enjoyed it all.
Awesome.
Is your wife in the human services field as well? Or?
Not anymore. She is a bookkeeper. So she's got her own bookkeeping business, and then does some bookkeeping work for our girls' school. So she keeps busy counting things.
Yeah. So Tracy's obviously always in the room here with us, but let's just talk amongst 3 small town Nebraska kids. We got Albion, we got Shelton, and we got Wood River. So
nice.
So all smaller schools, and then we have Tracy over from Louisiana, right? Nashville. Well, they're a little bit bigger than Shelton.
She grew up eating crawdads.
Yeah.
So. Crawfish, excuse me. In Nebraska, those are bait.
Definitely not something you eat. You use it to catch your food. Okay, well, hey, first of all, thanks for sharing all that. The Nebraska Family Helpline, it's obviously something that's been so amazingly helpful to people, in the human services field, but obviously outside the human services field who are needing the help. Talk to us a little bit about exactly what it is. What is the overall goal of the Nebraska Family Helpline?
Yeah, absolutely. So the helpline, we've actually been around just a little over 10 years. Ultimately, for those who've been working in human services that long, probably remember the safe haven crisis, where the legal loophole allowed for teenagers with behavioral issues to be dropped off at the hospital instead of infants whose parents they weren't able to care for. In the several months where that loophole in the law was in place, folks recognized there was an access issue for what we'd call non-system families. So parents whose children weren't necessarily in the child welfare system or weren't in the juvenile justice system had issues accessing some of those mental health, behavioral health services. And so as they closed the loophole, just a variety of stakeholders came together and said, we got to tackle this. And so put together a series of legislation, LB 603 for those that really want to dig in, to create a series of services that could help with that access issue. And one of them was the Nebraska Family Helpline. So it was originally designed as a 24/7 crisis hotline for parents and families who were needing access to mental health, behavioral health services and supports, statewide, completely free. And so with that, Boys Town, under the kind of the umbrella of the Boys Town National Hotline, because they've been around for 30 years, took that on as a service of the state of Nebraska. And so that was kind of that original intent, bringing to the table all the things that a parent and family might encounter, whether that's parent coaching, whether that's crisis de-escalation, suicidology, all the systems and services and resources that are in Nebraska through that 24/7 crisis hotline. And so it's staffed 24/7 by crisis counselors who are bachelor's level, trained in all those things that parents would call about, and really can help them work through whatever that call may be. As time went on, it is very apparent that, and anybody that's in this job knows, rarely is when folks need something, is rarely singular, right? It's a system. So we want to make sure that when folks call us, they're going to get help, whatever they need, whether that is the therapy or the behavioral health or the peer support, but also they're going to find, they know how to access the rent assistance, or they know where the food pantry and the food services are. They know how to engage the school and those kinds of things. And so we really, for folks that have seen our commercial tagline, any problem, anytime, we work very hard to mean that. And so as the 10 years have gone on, folks call us on any number of things. We do get a number of calls from professionals as well.
Sure.
School, teachers, law enforcement, other therapists. Everybody's really good at what they do, but again, with families, there's sometimes lots of things. And so professionals will call and say, hey, coach us through this, or let's talk about what's available.
How do you train your staff to adhere to all these different phone calls, whether it's from law enforcement or a private family or a therapist? I mean, there's so many different phone calls you can receive. How do you train your staff to make sure they're able to meet all the demands?
Yeah, it's a bit of a task. All of our counselors, it's about a 67-hour pre-service. Oh, wow. So they go through all the training that like a Boys Town National Hotline crisis counselor would go through, and that's going to include the crisis de-escalation, the suicidology, and intervention, and that when I say crisis intervention, that kind of thing. And then once that's done, we then tack on the helpline specific, and so that's going to include understanding the Nebraska system and services, understanding our resource database and the services that are available, and all the particularities of Nebraska, and so and then parenting techniques and supports, because by and large that's the majority of our calls, and so having those parenting tools in place that they can coach a family through. And so it's certainly your classroom type training, but it's also a lot of monitoring of other crisis counselors, and then being monitored and coached through the process. Sure. So that's a pretty hefty portion of it as well.
So I have a lot of. Go ahead, Tom.
I want to jump back to the beginnings, just real briefly. When Nebraska, I think, is in my 40-some years working mental health, behavioral health, we've been blessed with state senators that are very supportive of the work. And,
that's where I was going
stuff
to.
That we were, that we try to do. When that bill, took effect, and I remember testifying in support of that bill, there was a little bit of rocky start to that. And some of the components of the final legislation was that when Boys Town got that contract, that the number be a Nebraska Family Helpline number and not the Boys Town National Hotline number. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, the Navigator piece was a separate part of that contract that went out for, for bids, and that's had some changes to it. And I think that, I'm going to go back. I've been involved on the, from the implementation of that legislation. I didn't write it, but supporting it.
Who are the champions, Tom? Who are the senators that were champions of this? Do you remember?
Well, Kathy Campbell was
huge.
Was huge in that.
Shout out to Kathy Campbell.
Senator
Amanda.
Senator DeBoss was huge at the time.
DeBoss.
Still involved in our advisory board.
Amanda Gill was very, very much in that. It was a coalescence. There was a lot and it came out of the Safe Haven Act, to which I might add, Mr. Jim Blue, the president and CEO of Cedars, and myself testified and said, if you don't put an age limit on this, people are just going to be dropping off kids. No. But side note. But, I think that from my perspective of being, an outside looking in sometimes and also being inside looking out, the money that the legislature has appropriated to this program, to me, is some of the best investment that the state has made. And, Kyle will be talking about some of the numbers, which are really, when you sit and think about it, it's pretty astounding how utilized this is and how terrific it is. And one of the things that I really would like you to talk about at some point too is that Navigator piece.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, we'll definitely want to talk about that.
I mean, we have no agenda here, boys. So if we want to hit on that now, we sure can, Tom or Kyle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that does provide a nice kind of understanding of both where we came from as well as what we're really going for. And Tom's right. We've always had tremendous support of the state legislature. And it's a unique partnership because it's truly a service of the Division of Behavioral Health. It's one of their programs, overseen by that state legislature, provided by the Boys Town and the Boys Town National Hotline, sharing that infrastructure and just that call center experience for those crisis lines. And so we've always had just a great relationship. When you have that many kind of eyes on something, I know that sometimes makes folks nervous, but they've been great to work with as far as that goes. And so with that, going all the way back to that original intent was both through the Nebraska Family Helpline, giving families that access point. But then again, it was never intended to be like a referral line, right?
Sure.
It was never just meant, all right, give us 3 phone numbers and call it a day. No, it was really intended to be, all right, here's how we access and here's how we get coaching through it. And so as it starts with us, we take that kind of that initial phone call, de-escalate the crisis, and then begin to build a plan with the families. That's a great start, and we follow up and we work with them through. But sometimes families need more than that. And so a partner service that was started at the same time with us under that same legislation was the Family Navigator program. And it's a peer support system where folks who have they're professionals but have had their own children go through one of the systems, right? And they've come out the other side successfully. They're now providing that peer support professionally to families accessing system-type services. And so if a family's needing that more intensive, direct, face-to-face, hands-on support, navigating, we're able to connect the families to that service immediately on that phone call. It's an immediate referral. And then the Family Navigator, the peer support specialist, works with the family to literally walk them through, and they'll work with them on average 2 months. And so, again, that's completely free when they're needing that direct face-to-face support. So it's not just a phone call to make. There's tangible things attached to it, and that goes all the way back to that original intent.
Tom, didn't we have somebody on the podcast that was in that role? Is that where Mrs. Phelps was at?
Yeah, Lakeisha.
Yeah.
She is one of the peer support specialists.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's
Holy
fantastic.
Cow. What a neat lady.
And and I think that is so important because if it's especially if it's an initial call, we're having these difficulties, we need some help. The system can be a little overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when they drafted this language, having that piece in there has been crucial to the success of the entire program.
To your point, Tom, I've been in human services now for ongoing 16 years. there's times where I still get confused. So I can't imagine being, someone that's not involved in the system or first time involved in the system looking for help, trying to find the right direction. So, I mean, what an amazing service that you guys are providing to these families.
Yeah, I think if we didn't have that ability to connect to someone that was going to reach out to them, come out to them, meet with them, sit and have a cup of coffee with them, I think it takes some of the teeth out of what we're able to do with families. They just knowing that there's someone there, because I think families are often they've tried different things. I mean, it's rare they've just done nothing, and so when they're looking for help, just to be told you're on the right track. I know it doesn't feel good yet, but just knowing you've done the right things and made the right phone calls, that's assuring to them, and they feel like they've gained some of that control back. And I think having the ability to put that service just in place immediately helps the families just feel better.
So you use the term immediately. We get a phone call from Family X. They get involved with the Navigator program. How long does it take, or what is the time frame does it take to reach out to that family?
They're going to hear from them in 24 to 48 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah, it's real quick, it's real fast. So that's definitely available. And sidebar, because we don't have an agenda.
We don't have an agenda.
As time has gone on, and we've really looked at where are families accessing help, where are they needing it, what's the gaps, and that's kind of one of our roles as we're encountering the entire system. Is where can we put things in place to better support families through that entire continuum of need. And one of the things that's really has been developed over the 10 years was that crisis response team, that mobile crisis response service. You go all the way back to 2012 in the Region 6 area, so Omaha, Bellevue, Papillion, Blair, Fremont, that area, as they were, through some different funding, able to start providing crisis response teams to youth. They've been doing it for adults for years, and they started doing that. And that really became the legwork where, if a family calls us and they're in the middle of a mental health crisis, nobody needs arrested, nobody needs to be at the hospital, but they need help from a therapist to de-escalate that situation, to avoid going to those places and get that immediate help. We became one of two access points for that. Law enforcement could request it, and then we could put it in place for family if we weren't able to de-escalate over the phone. And so that became the groundwork as then, the system of care implementation grant that happened about 3.5-4 years ago, really provided the framework for the rest of the state to take on that model. And so for the last 3.5-4 years, that's been a statewide service as well, provided by local providers. So that way there's always a therapist, never more than 30 to 45 minutes away from helping a family. And so that's really been, as you talk about needing that immediate help, that's something that we've been able to just partner by just making sure we want to do whatever's best for families. One of the things that folks needing that immediate help, it is available.
So, Tom, sorry if I cut you off there. So the Nebraska Family Helpline, obviously it sounds like it covers a large array of issues. Are there things that you guys don't do per se? How deep in the weeds can you get medically? We're gonna, no matter who calls us, they're gonna feel helped, because that's what we do. I mean, that's our approach. But we can't give medical advice, and we can't give legal advice. Now, as luck would have it, we do know where medical providers are, and we do know where legal providers are, particularly the lower cost, the sliding scale, the community-based clinics, those kinds of things, where, because typically when they're calling us asking those questions, cost is an issue. Absolutely.
And so we want to make sure that, I can't tell you what to do about that specific legal or medical issue, but I absolutely know who can, and I know how quickly they can give you some answers. Let's connect you to them, because there's a big difference. Essentially, I'm saying the same thing when I say, let's connect you to these people, because they're going to give you exactly what you need, versus, I'm sorry, we don't do that. Ask these other people. It's the exact same result, but somebody feels helped and somebody doesn't. And so we want to make sure, no matter what they call for, they do feel helped, and they are on the road to getting answers.
The other part that I think that's important also is the family knows that that's very confidential. That it's, while, the helpline staff aggregate data, none of that, nothing is ever, identifiable, to a family or whatever. And so, it is totally confidential.
Yeah, and we're an anonymous line. Anybody can call us. They're not required to give us any information to talk, ask questions. Specific services might require getting some information to make a referral, like for Family Navigator or crisis response team, because if a therapist is going out to your house, got to know where to send them.
Yep.
But other than something that someone's wanting and asking for, they can call themselves whatever name they want, and that's the only identifier we really have.
So next question I have is maybe more of a personal question because I'm interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your answer. Have there been times, and you don't need to give specifics, obviously.
Sure.
But has there been times where the staff has said, you know what, you need to hang up and call 911?
Yeah, that has happened. Although here's the thing, not very often.
Okay, good.
And all of our staff is trained in that because that does tend to happen more on those true like the Voice National Hotline has the Lifeline provider, and so that's a much more common call for them. So they're well trained, and we have kind of all the backup supports in place for if that happens. As it relates to the helpline, we don't have that happen a ton, primarily because the person in crisis isn't usually the person calling. It's usually a parent or a guardian, and so that doesn't happen a ton. And partly because we were able to de-escalate. The times where it's obviously going to happen when there's imminent risk, whether it's to self or others. And so that, like I said, that can happen, but it's not a common call. Let me give you an example.
Please.
Over the 10 years, we've taken over 50,000 calls. We're at that 50,000 point. We serve 36,000 families. Those types of calls that are what we call high risk, where we're contacting law enforcement, where we're contacting CPS, or we're even sending out a crisis response team. There's about 500 of those over 10 years. So what is that? What is 500 out of 50,000?
You're looking at the wrong guy.
Right. Whatever that math is. Yes, no one's here because we did math well. No. So it's not a daily thing. It's not a monthly thing, even to that degree. So we certainly know what to do, well equipped, always prepared, but it doesn't happen.
Do you think a lot of that is because of the way you market the helpline and you get that message out there that we are here for these specific reasons, or maybe not even specific reasons, but this is when you would call the helpline versus?
I think that is a big part of it. And I do think also it's because I think our staff are trained in how to de-escalate, because ultimately we're in place to keep folks from in the back seats of police cars, or to keep people out of the waiting rooms of emergency rooms. And so if we can de-escalate and assess as quickly as possible, and that's really some of that de-escalation training and lethality assessment that happens so quickly, can make a quick determination. And if even we can just get that little bit into that situation and de-escalate it from that point, we're going to try and do that as quickly as possible, while at the same time always knowing what that threshold is for it's time to look to those higher risk services.
One of the things you mentioned there, Kyle, was going back to the data, 50,000 calls since the inception of this hotline. You had a number, and I can't remember what it was, of unduplicated families. It was huge.
36,000 individual unique Nebraska families.
I think sometimes people think, well, Nebraska is unlike the rest of the country. We don't have mental health, behavioral health needs, like some other states and stuff. So here's a state of 1.7 million people, and you've got 36,000 individual families that in that time frame of calls saying, I need some help. I just think that speaks absolute volumes for the program and the availability of it.
Yeah, I think because you mentioned our marketing, and goes back to the original intent. Nobody wanted a hotline to nowhere. No one needed just another phone number. Sure, it had to serve people, and so our marketing is getting our information out there so that people can find it when they need it, have access to it. So we certainly do the marketing, the commercials, and the online stuff, and that's been a huge work for us because that's the first place people go when they start looking for tangible help. And so making sure we're available to find us when we need it. But also so much that is playing well in the sandbox with everybody. Our only interest is serving Nebraska families. And so we want to partner with different providers so that when they need help with folks, they can work with us. And when we need help and the families ultimately need help, we're working with them. So I do spend a lot of time working in the community, working with different organizations and agencies and community work groups and initiatives for that explicit purpose, that awareness, going all the way back to how do we keep our folks aware, but also just when we set a family up with a service or with a provider, we know they're going to get good service and good outcomes. So always making sure that we know what's going on. We know who's out, where families are going to get the best help. And so that's just a huge part of that.
So before we go any further, let's make sure people know, how do we get a hold of the helpline? What's the number?
Yeah, so our number, it's 1-888-866-8660, and they can just Google Helpline, Nebraska Helpline, Nebraska Family Helpline, Nebraska Help, all those kinds of things. Trickles to us real quickly. Is there? Oops, sorry, Kyle.
Yeah, no, go. Is there a fear? Is there a fear upon the families that they may call and get a busy signal? What does that look like? I mean, do you have obviously more than one line, or what does that look like?
We do. Okay, so they're not going to get a busy signal. So
I didn't anticipate they would.
No,
but
we don't have an automated system. We don't have voicemail. Over the 10 years, taking those, like I said, those 50,000 calls, we've answered 99.6% of those calls within 10 seconds. Wow. We've always had the protocols in place so that those phone calls get answered. So we have dedicated crisis counselors. Like I said, we're under the umbrella of the Boy Scout National Line, but we're not the Boy Scout National Hotline. So they sit there, we sit here, and so we always have those dedicated crisis counselors available and ready. But there are times when they're on all the phone calls. So then we have protocols in place where admin. So myself, I have a clinical supervisor, a program supervisor. We sign on. I think in my 7 years, the record, we had 7 people on at one time.
Oh, wow.
Taking on a phone call. And so that does happen, and it certainly is happened a lot more lately.
Sure.
The coronavirus pandemic has really ballooned our volume for sure. No, we don't want people dealing with automated systems and voicemails. We answer the phone.
There used to be, excuse me, I'm not sure if they're still doing it or not, but school districts, in start of the year, packets of information going out to schools and stuff, going home to parents. Mm-hmm. A sheet with the Boys Town hotline and a magnet, was in those. They've done an awesome job of some commercials that have been on television and stuff that are very informative and guide you there. I would encourage, anybody that's listening to this podcast, if your agency has a website, get a hold of Kyle, and he will give you the link to put the Helpline emblem moniker on your website. So parents, if they're looking for resources somewhere and they go to your website and they see that, they can click on that and it takes them right to the information they need to get a hold of the Helpline.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a number of schools have thrown our logo up there. That's easy. It's a simple ask, and a couple of emails later, they can throw it up there, no problem.
Kyle, can you talk about? I call you. I'm Family X that Rico was talking about, and you've given me information. You've given me referral. You've hooked me into a navigator and stuff. There's the callback.
Yeah.
Program.
Yeah. So our ultimate goal is that folks connect to services and have their needs met. We want outcomes. It's again, we give referrals, but we're not a referral line. So one of the things that we do is that we take that initial call, de-escalate the crisis, understand what's going on, then create a plan. And then we schedule a follow-up call where we're going to reach back out to the family. Now, they can call us anytime. We're 24/7. Call us back in an hour if you need to. But we're going to schedule that follow-up call. It might be an hour later. It might be the next day. It might be 3 days later. It's individualized to what the family needs and kind of what's going on with their situation. So then we follow up and see where it's going. If we need additional options, or if we need to tweak the plan, or if the plan's just going exactly like it should, and then kind of work our way out. On average, we're going to follow up and work with the family 2 to 3 months. It really varies a lot, but on average, kind of 90 to 120 days at most, where, kind of stretches itself out. But yeah, we continue to follow up with the family as much as is appropriate. And so that when all is said and done, the plan's in place, outcomes are occurring, then 90 days later, we're going to call you back and just make sure.
Sure.
Because we want to make sure that you've engaged with the services, you got systems put in place. And what we've found is families do, because when they're getting access to the services in the crisis, they're way more likely to engage, so that when we get to that kind of that last 90-day checkup, over 2/3 of those families have engaged with the services and worked through it. They haven't been in contact with law enforcement. They've stayed going to school. They're still living within their family home, all those kinds of things. And so really I found real good outcomes for families when, kind of that 90, 120 day point.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to realize that callback is not a customer survey.
No, certainly not.
Were we timely? Were we, it
Oh
was
my gosh.
it's dedicated to how you doing?
Yeah.
How have you gotten? So,
No, and I think going back to even just how we train, I never want anybody to call us to ever feel like they're getting a survey done or anything like that. It's got to feel like I talk about it like, again, small town Nebraska. I remember when I was a little kid, my grandma would take me to the coffee shop with her, and she'd sit and have coffee. And this is, I'm almost 40, so let's go back, when I was 5-6 years old, back when you could smoke in coffee shops. So, she'd sit around there with her friends and smoking and having a donut, and grandma would let me sit there and have a donut. And I remember they were the bestest friends, and they gossip and do all the things that grandmas did back in 1985. And I remember watching that and just
I ain't saying anything, Tom. I'm not saying anything.
and understanding how much that meant to my grandma and how close those ladies were. And so I still use that to this day, that I want anybody that calls us, it's to feel more like they're sharing a cup of coffee with somebody than they're calling a crisis line. Yep. Now, they're calling a crisis line, don't get me wrong, but I want it to feel more like that. Or they're calling their favorite aunt who can give them direct, hard advice or hard feedback, and they're grateful. I want those kinds of feelings rather than a survey or a crisis line or, heaven forbid, a telemarketer. Right? So I think that's just a big part of how we engage families.
Right.
So I have a couple questions here, and I had to jot them down so I don't forget them. And one of the next questions I do want to ask is COVID related. But before I get there, knowing that our young people deal so much with cell phones and text messaging and all of that stuff, is there a component to text message, or is it strictly the phone call? Has there been thought of adding something like that, just for convenience sake for the kids, or what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. And so we don't get a ton of contacts from children. We take them.
Sure.
We're prepared for them. So we've from that standpoint, no. There's some other great resources for kids to text and call and chat. Yep. So no need to duplicate. But as far as the parents, yeah, there certainly has been conversation about that over the years. Ultimately, it's kind of
a voice is better.
It's cost prohibitive, and the voice is better.
Yep, I agree.
We've always had emails, and they're a good access point, but I think it's hard to really get the level of support that a family is really needing through that short medium. And so
that's great.
It's always been kicked around, cost, and I haven't had a chance to test to see about quality. But.
Well, and there's always something to be said to actually talk. Like you made a big deal about not having to go through a voicemail or automated type of phone call. There's always something reassuring about that voice on the other line. Whether it's someone you don't know, when you're in the middle of a crisis, you want to talk to somebody. Yeah. You don't want to text back and forth. You don't want to wait for that little bubble to pop up and say something. So that makes sense. I get that.
Yeah. No, I think that would be. I would hate to lose that personal aspect of it for sure. We're always aware of as things change. But if I had my druthers, I'd say voice would win out.
Good. So COVID, you mentioned that you guys have been seeing some additional phone calls coming due to COVID. What has the increase in phone calls been like, and what is the major concern that's going on right now? Because COVID is huge for everybody right now, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious of what you're seeing on your guys' end.
Probably the best way to describe it is we're seeing everything. I think COVID has interrupted absolutely everything about people's lives, from education to job to finances to sports, how you go to the gas station and the pharmacy and a doctor's appointment. I mean, everything is impacted. And so I think what we're seeing is that all the things that were a struggle before or a challenge or a barrier, it's that same barrier plus COVID. And so folks are reaching out for help that have never reached out for help anywhere before. And so it's causing people that were fighting through it, struggling, just getting by. And this has just been that last kind of nudge over the to where they're reaching out for help. And so we're seeing just a huge increase in first-time callers that have never called anybody for anything, and we're the first phone number they found. And so they're really it's it's very all over the map. Another impact, and this one makes me a little bit nervous. And I've had in talking to other providers and the education system, the K-12 schools, they're nervous about this too. Is COVID is people have kind of just put a lot of things on pause. I get it. I have too. I mean, let's be honest. But so they've put the big things on pause. I mean, I guess if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so the mental health services, the behavioral health services, I think parents are putting some of those on pause. Oh, geez. And so I get it. I understand it. But when you got to figure out, all right, how am I really going to get a check cashed? Or how am I going to get my services in place? Or, I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent this month or any of the things, or I don't even, I don't got masks. Like, what am I going to, all those things that are just, how do I get through today are taking so much more precedence in what people are looking for. And so I'd say that has shifted a bit. And when folks are calling us, they're having parenting and family issues, but what they're wanting is a lot more the day to day. And I think the schools are kind of seeing the same thing, and different providers are seeing the same thing. And so we're certainly helping all those kinds of things. But I'm worried about that is just as COVID is causing all of us to kick so many things down the road, kick that can down the road. Eventually, that's going to become the bigger thing. What is that going to look like? What is it going to mean? No one, I don't think anybody really knows. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got ideas, but I'm a little nervous about COVID's impact in that kind of that capacity, because the day to day is just trumping everything else as far as what folks are wanting help with, and so that's been a huge impact. Our volume is really, like I said, ballooned. The last 3 months it's up 70% over our best quarter ever, and so it's we're certainly keeping busy. And just keeping our finger on the pulse of what is available, because COVID resources changes, it seems like almost daily. And so knowing what's available, where you get the right help, what you get. And so a lot of system partners are helping each other out and putting, different initiatives in place, so that keeping just everybody informed, but also kind of who you can reach out to for what. And so I really am proud of kind of the folks that we work with in different agencies, because I think there's a lot of good folks taking care of people. And while no one's enjoyed this pandemic, and it's been a long year, it's brought out a lot of good out of a lot of people that I just had the pleasure of working with. So I think the more we continue to do that and play well in the sandbox and take care of people, I feel pretty good about Nebraska.
Sure. Well, and I mean, this is just a good time to remind it. And obviously you do a heck of a lot more work than just system-involved youth. I mean, you've made that perfectly clear, and which is great to hear. But for you that are out there that work with kids, probation officers, HHS workers, CFS workers, any nonprofit, provide your families with this number, because it sounds like they are definitely going to get help if they call. So please, by all means, we'll talk a little bit more at the end when we wrap up on how we get brochures handed out and magnets and things like that when that time comes. But by all means, please get this to your families. There's probably a good chance they won't use it, but in the instance that they need it, it's a lot easier to have it right away.
Yeah,
just to search for it.
Yeah, rarely does anybody need it when they get handed a brochure, but in 6 weeks, when Johnny doesn't come home from school on time, and it's the 5th time this week, and they need a phone number. They're done, and they're at that point where they're tired of walking on eggshells. They're tired of feeling like they're not in control. It's end of the rope, and all the great metaphors we have for that feeling that we have when we just don't feel like we have control anymore. That's what we want to give parents back.
Yeah. And again, I mean, even if they're not system involved, please give them that number. I mean, just quite frankly, just spread the word of the number, because specifically in times that we're going through right now, you just don't know what family, what kids, what people are going to need help at some time. So.
Well, the other part of that is everybody's got emergency numbers on your refrigerator and all of that kind of stuff. It doesn't hurt to have this, and for when you need it. And there might even be a neighbor that you can say, I hear you, try this number. 99 counties in Nebraska. Mm-hmm. What's the saturation rate?
We've hit all the counties.
Have you really?
We have. There was one lone county, I'm not going to throw them under the bus, that it doesn't have a large population. I'll leave it at that. That we went about 3 years that we just where we had served everybody else. And finally, then just this summer, got a phone call, and I was able to help some families there. And truly, it is a little bit of a testament to that very small county that there was one local single individual case manager kind of serving folks out of their personal business. They had two jobs, and they did both, and that's where just people knew to go to for help. So we supported that, and so we said, if you ever need anything, in the county more than that, talking to the local school, call us. But if you don't, by all means, keep using this caseworker, because they're doing great work, and I have no interest in replacing something that's working. So
Absolutely.
But yeah, so we are 100% of the counties statewide, and so I do, looking, it's a big state. I do quite a fair amount of traveling. Just
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
yeah, just because and meeting with professionals and different, like I said, different work groups, whether it's juvenile justice, probation, child welfare, academic education, you name it. Rotary boards have me out sometimes, and
That's
so
good to know. I serve on Rotary 14, so
Awesome.
here in Lincoln. So
well, if you ever need someone to talk about Nebraska Family Helpline, certainly would love to come out. Really, there's people have to know about us, and we have to know about kind of what's going on in all the communities. And so I'm about out of the office about half the time, doing just different events or work groups, or really just working in the communities.
do you do? I think I'm going to know the answer to this question, but would you be willing to do like 15, 20-hour lunch and learn for organizations here in the state of Nebraska then? I mean, let's just use where I am employed at here at Cedars. If we wanted to have a lunch and learn to learn more about what the hotline does, would you be willing to have somebody out to do that?
Yeah, I come on and talk over lunch. I do. I've done a number of those.
So agencies, hit him up. We'll get his information out later if he's willing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for all agencies that are out there working with kids and families, that might be smart, something to do.
Yeah,
for the past many years, you could find Kyle at the Nebraska Juvenile Justice Association annual conference.
One of the best conferences in the state, mind you.
Well, he will be, I'm sure, once again, May 5th, 6th, and 7th of 2021.
Would never miss it, Tom. Not a chance. It's good to connect with folks there.
It is. That's how my work with NJJA started, was simply just attending the conference.
Yeah.
And I had gone for 6-7 years before I got involved with the board, and what a great conference it turns out to be. We can't say enough good things about our conference committee. They're fantastic. So
they do really great work.
I just always look back to every year they have a advisory committee presentation. There's several of us on the advisory committee, and I don't know how much advising we do other than, man, you guys are knocking it out of the park. But I go back to the data. 50,000 calls, 36,000 unduplicated families from every county in Nebraska, and this feedback that you guys receive on the thank you for the help.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've got so many anecdotal examples of that. It could fill the room.
Yeah, no, I think it's always good to have those callers kind of go through the entire story. Where in that initial phone call, it starts off with a mom who's crying, and because she's about to ask you, will you come take my kids tonight? I'm done. And so it starts there. And that's not an uncommon call, because they're at their wit's end. So that in no means is an indictment on that mom. That's just where she's at. Overwhelmed. Can't imagine, but they are. And so you start there. And so as you de-escalate that immediate crisis, but you work forward, like I said, 3 months later, you're at the point where the child's still in the home. They're going to school. They're involved with their therapist. The medication has been managed, and the mom just feels good again, and she's got some of that hope back for her family. And I think that's where we want it to be. We don't want stories ending in emergency rooms and police cars. Nobody does. We want mom to feel better about what's going on, and we want her child to get the help that they need. And that is the anecdote. They sound a lot like that. Pick a day. That's what we're talking about.
You mentioned that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that all your staff have bachelor's level degrees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that means they can be 22, 23, some of them? 24. I'm dating myself here too, but they're young. Some of them are probably young.
Some of them are young, and we have the entire spectrum. We have someone who's been working in human services for 40 plus years, and we have some that are in their second. They're in their graduate program, working on their master's in counseling or social work, and where their evening, their 20 to 30 hour a week job, and everything in between. We have some that are have had, they come from juvenile justice and probation. We have some that were therapists for years, and we have a little bit of everything. But they can. We try. We really, the goal is less. We don't think too much about, like I said, maybe whether they're parents or not, whether age. It's, can they talk to a parent in a crisis in such a way that parent feels help.
Yep, and that's what my point was going to get at is some of these kids are. I mean, some of these kids. Oh boy, some of these individuals could be young, 24, 25, and to get those phone calls, the training. I know we already talked about the training, but to prepare them to answer those phone calls when this mom is crying and possibly hysterical, to be able to be composed and willing to work with this family to get them that crisis diverted. The training just has to be top notch. And I've always known Boys Town gives great trainings. They always have. But they just have, they've got to be so well prepared. And it's neat to hear that there's, you have some that have been there for, in the field for 44 years. How much can they learn from the younger generation, learn from those people that have been there for so long? I mean, that's just a neat thing in itself.
Yeah, and it's when you talk about our crisis counselor who's had that just the long career, and she is, when I talk about that favorite aunt that could literally tell you anything, even if it's what you don't want to hear, and you thank her for it, that's totally her. And she's able to provide that for the other counselors as well. As she can give that feedback in such a way that you're just grateful because she's invested in you, and so as she helps train crisis counselors, or as they monitor her and she monitors them and shadows and those kinds of things, they're just grateful for because she's invested in them, and and then she takes it to the phones and the callers as they're talking to her, and I've got just the bestest staff. I mean, I really do. But callers know when they're talking to her, she's invested in them and their children, and she wants nothing but the best, and you can just tell, and you can hear it in the voice and how they talk. Even when maybe if it's things you don't want to hear, she can do that, and nothing but gratitude for it. And so really, like I said, we don't have a lot of turnover. Our staff they like what they do. It's 24/7, so it provides lots of great opportunities for those folks who need non-traditional hours, as they're in graduate school, or they have a day job in human services, but they want to do something on the side, or they just want some of that experience. It gives a lot of those good opportunities because, it's hard to find what we do elsewhere.
So these individuals on your staff, they report to an office somewhere. They're not taking the phone calls from home. They are in an office somewhere, correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Until COVID hit, yes, that was 100% true.
Absolutely.
We were centralized in one location with COVID. We were able to transition a good percentage of our staff to work from home with all the technology and systems in place so that confidentiality and privacy and all those things. And so that's also a testament to some of my supervisors and the supervisors at the hotline, and how quickly we were able to make that happen so that we didn't have any downtime. The phone stayed active. And so we still have a few counselors on site, and we rotate administration through so that there's always that direct supervision. And so it's really truth be told, we haven't skipped a beat as far as staffing and keeping things going through COVID. Team effort, of course. So that's been, but yeah, I would, parents and families wouldn't have known the difference.
Sure. Tom likes to talk about data, and rightfully so, because all the data that you're sharing is really impressive. What other, do you have any other data that you'd like to share with whoever's listening to the podcast, the millions of people listening around the world?
Sure. So, I think folks want to know, do you truly serve the whole state? We do. Our call volume by and large follows population trends. If a certain percentage of the state lives in Norfolk, that's pretty close to the number of calls we're going to get in a given year, because we do target marketing and outreach statewide. We talk about have some of our partnering services. We've made over 4,000 referrals for that family navigation service. So families are getting that. It's provided by the different family orgs that are located throughout the state by the behavioral health regions. And so good partnerships there, so that they're local folks. That you need to know where the official professional services are, but you also need to know what the informal supports are in any given community. I think that's critical. I talk about the one county that we didn't serve for the longest time is because there was someone there who knew what happened locally, and they just took care of it. Yep. So you want that local piece in place. And so the family orgs and the family navigator service is able to provide that. And so, we're connecting families there. I think when I talk about the new stuff that matters, COVID certainly has been an impact, and it's just been a part of everything we've been talking about for 6 months with families. Is COVID first hit, our call volume started to look a lot like a summer month. Our June and July are typically our slowest months because when school is not in session, there's less interactions between parent and child that causes strife. I don't have to make my child get up. I don't have to make them go to bed as early. I don't have to make them do homework. I didn't get a negative phone call from school. All of those interactions can lead to crisis or to strife. And so those tend to trigger that event that folks call us for. So over the summer, it's slower. Is it slow? No, but slower. And so the first couple of months of COVID, it looked like that. And then June happened, and everybody was kind of done with that. And so it went from a summer month to an 80% jump over our record month ever. And so just overnight, the phones lit up. And so that really has been held true since June 1st. And we didn't do anything special or change anything. It just, I think, as COVID drug on, parents and families and the folks working with parents and families just started reaching out because they were tired of waiting for COVID to get over. Mm-hmm. And so that has held true. And so we're like I said, our last quarter is just obliterated our old best quarter. And so we're certainly keeping busy with that, I think. And that is population trend. Sure. So, because we talk about the counties where COVID, they haven't had a COVID case in months, or I think there's still 5 that haven't had any ever. We're still getting calls because COVID is impacting those people and how they live their lives and what's normal for them. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how long it goes and what is the fallout and what is the impact. What do we learn from it? How do we help people on the backside? And so a lot of people asking that question, and we certainly want to be part of those conversations.
So, along the same lines as COVID, I mean, we hear a lot about how COVID is affecting mental health. And is that what you're seeing in these phone calls? Is it an increase in mental health phone calls and quite frankly, just suicide in manner?
It's present. I think it's coming. Mm-hmm. I think it's people they're feeling helpless. They're not feeling hopeless yet. I'm worried it's coming though. It's salt and peppering into conversations more and more. I wouldn't say it's there yet where like this is what's going on, but you see the signs, both in personal life and professional, just as you talk to people and you're involved with, it's circling. Sure. And so I think as it relates to kids and the parents, I think everybody's on edge. Everybody's anxious, and there's enough things going on in our world. Of course they are, right? I mean, pull up the news. You'll find a reason. I think the suicide or that kind of some of your high-end mental health issues, that isn't upticking. Anxiety absolutely is. And so it
makes sense.
If I had to,
unfortunately, it makes sense.
Yeah, if I had to guess, culturally, we're all feeling anxious. For those that live in a state of anxiety for a long time, I mean, read a couple of journal articles, we know what happens next. It is depression, it is suicide, it is some of those higher kind of working up the spectrum. I think we're anxious right now, and
so So kind of one of the things, we talk about call coming in from the families in crisis. You can also take that call of that family that's going, I'm really concerned where we're headed.
Oh, yeah.
We're not there yet, but I don't know what to do when we get to that.
That's a great point, Tom.
Yeah.
Point.
And I, when I talk about the data, half of our callers are in crisis. The other half aren't. They just want help. And they might know what they need or they might not. It's, they're reaching out, they have questions. And so that goes all the way back to some of the marketing that was put in place before I even came on board. Tom probably remembers, the first couple of years of the program it was all the marketing, all the material, all the information was crisis, crisis, crisis. And that made sense. But then it's like, there's a bigger spectrum of parents and families needing help. And so they really began to change the message to where any problem, anytime, let's start early. Let's prevent problems, not clean them up, because cleaning them up has scars, preventing doesn't. And so really that kind of became the message over the years, to where it continued to see the crisis calls, but really was able to grow people calling from a prevention standpoint, or from a let's plan ahead, or let's get help when we see signs, or and so my folks are prepared for potty training isn't going well, and they're also prepared for my 15-year-old just came home from school, they're suicidal in the bathroom, what do I do?
I just can't imagine having that whole broad spectrum is so far. That's just so interesting that we have one number. We don't just have one number, but we have one number that can help with all of that.
Right, and I think that's important. It's a helpline.
Mm-hmm. It's the help.
It's got
right.
crisis, and it is that.
Don't wait until the crisis.
Right,
don't.
Right.
I think that's important to get out there. Is you don't have to wait until the crisis hits. Let's prepare. Let's get ahead of things before the crisis hits, and you guys can help with that.
Yeah, we would certainly love to prevent a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Let's catch it early. And so we really did see growth over the years, in that 50% of our calls are between the ages of 12 and 15, and those tend to be more crisis. But the other 50% really grew in the 5 to the 12-year-old, where it is more prevention. We're seeing some of those early signs where the first calls from school where he struggled on this or he didn't do that, as opposed to he's been expelled. Mm-hmm. And so, the approach was very different. And so I really do, in really speaking to kind of, we say, whatever that next phone call could be, really anything. We really do want, we have a good model of approach, or a model of care for how our counselors approach all the calls, so that they can take any of those types of calls, but they kind of has as a model or foundation for how they're approaching it. And so that they can deal with whatever that next phone call might be. It also helps that they have 24/7 clinical oversight. I'm a therapist. Our clinical supervisor is a therapist, so they always have that available. And then one thing that we do is we review every call, and so that we make sure that the right outcomes are happening, the right plan was put in place, the right services, and all those kinds of things. So that that helps with training, but it also helps with making sure that families are getting good outcomes, because we're making sure from ground one that what was put in place was the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Kind of off the cuff question here: is there an accrediting body that you guys are accredited by, or you just fall under the Boys Town umbrella with their accreditation? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah. No. So all of our crisis counselors are, and our program is accredited by the Association of Suicidology. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the biggest one. And then we're also certified or accredited. I can never get the right one on this one. So being the Nebraska provider for Lifeline suicide prevention, so the national suicide prevention number, so they certify as the suicide prevention crisis de-escalation. And so that also is kind of one of the other piece. And so that covers a lot of the crisis counseling, and then also the suicidology. And then we train, like I said, for parenting and those kinds of things with some of the Boys Town resources and some others we pull in.
Mm-hmm. Tom, what else you got? Anything?
I am such a believer in this program.
Agree.
And I just want to go back to thank the legislators that that pushed this through, the ones that reinvested in it, and kept moving it forward. I want people to realize that I think Nebraska is ahead of the curve on a lot of this, thanks to the to the helpline. And in my years of being on the tertiary portion of this, to see the dedication of those staff, and it doesn't take long in talking with Kyle to know how fervently he believes in this, and he's seen the outcomes of it. And I just want to tell people this program is there. It is the best investment, most bang for the buck that I have seen probably come out of government. And this is, with everything that's going on, if we didn't even have COVID, there's still that tremendous need out there. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to go away. And it's programs like this that are helping kids and families, keeping people together, giving them resources, and I just applaud the work that you guys do, and thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. No, I've got a lot of great partners. Between the legislature, they've been wonderful to work with over the years. Our Division of Behavioral Health, really managing our contract, they've always been a great partner. Got a wonderful contract manager and his team, and then Boys Town's giving us all the resources we need to make it work for families. And so that the infrastructure's in place, we can always answer the phone, those kinds of things. And my staff, golly.
Mm-hmm. Where would we be?
Yeah, right. They make my job so easy. Mm-hmm. I don't ever have to worry that I'm out there just telling people, yeah, call us. Absolutely. Call us. They'll take care of you because mm-hmm. I know they will. Now, if anybody ever says, I have questions about something that happened, they can always reach out to me because we love feedback, and we always want to know if there's better ways we can do things. Mm-hmm. But I'm very confident in my staff, and they do wonderful work for families because I've looked them all in the eye, and I know they're invested in families.
Wow. Website.
How do we get a hold of you? How do we get magnets and brochures and all that stuff?
So they can call the number directly, 888-866-8660. The crisis counselor can actually set them up directly. They can email me at kyle.kinney@boystown.org.
How do you spell Kinney?
Kinney, like the old shoe company that nobody remembers anymore.
I no idea.
Yeah, I'm probably the last year or two that would remember it.
Tom, you remember that, Tom?
God, I'm wearing them.
Like Jeff Kinney, but no relation.
There we go. That I know.
Yes, there we go. Or they can, go and go to our website at www.anyfamilyhelpline.any.gov. Or they can just Google, if they Google Nebraska Family Helpline or Helpline, it will go right to our website. And there's a spot on our website where you can request brochures and magnets and whatnot. It shoots an email out, and we get that in the mail right away. Also, you can email me, and more than happy to come talk to your staff or your organization and about what we do and how we work and how we can partner and those kinds of things as well.
Awesome. Well, guys, we just did 60 minutes.
Oh, wow.
How fast does that go?
Real fast.
Yeah. Hey, Kyle, I just want to kind of echo what Tom said. Thank you guys so much for what you do. And, it's amazing to have resources like that at hand for our families. It's just such a blessing to have. So, again, thank you for coming today.
Love it.
Tom was, he watched your presentation, I think about, on his way to the car, he emailed and said, "We got to get this guy on." So, and what Tom says goes.
Oh yeah.
So
well, for sure, everybody knows that.
Oh yeah, everybody knows.
He's an intimidating guy.
I'm going to have my wife listen to this podcast.
Big Kinney shoes.
Yeah, good luck with that one. Good luck with that one. Hey, no, that'll wrap us up today. But again, as always, a huge shout out to Sherwood Foundation for making this possible. You guys are amazing. We'll have a couple more episodes coming up soon. The next one is, Tom, go ahead.
We're scheduling that. We'll have Sierra Sherrod and Bobby Taylor, two of our award recipients for the conference this year that we had to cancel, but we're going to have them on. Two remarkable young ladies.
Awesome.
It's going to be cool.
That's going to be fun. That is going to be fun. Next year's dates for the conference.
May 5, 6, 7, 2021 in Kearney. And we are sure that all of this is going to, COVID's like a gallstone. It too shall pass. And we're all going to get together out in Kearney and celebrate.
New facility, old facility?
Still at the same one. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
The other one's under construction, but
Yep,
it's not.
that's great. They've always been wonderful to us.
Yep,
great hosts.
All right, that'll wrap it up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Enjoy
much.
your weeks, your days, everything.
Thank you, Kyle.
You bet.